Dragan, Part 2. It's possible the sniper is gone. At least 10 minutes have passed since he fired, and already several people have made it through the intersection without incident. Dragan moves closer to the edge of the street, contemplating crossing. He's hungry, feels the emptiness of his stomach urge him across. The bakery is on the other side. Only two more especially dangerous crossings, and he will have bread. This is a symbol, but another part of him knows there's no hurry. He's not going to starve to death over a few extra minutes of waiting, whereas a lack of caution will get him killed quicker than anything. He steps back a bit, turns to lean against the warm metal of the rail car shielding him from Grabaka and the hills above, up to Vraka, the old war fort. He used to take his wife and son to Vraka for picnics in the summer, when they didn't have time to go to the park at Edilza or up Mount Trebevic. From there you could see most of the city, a fact that has taken on a whole new significance in recent months. On his right, a woman approaches, and as she gets closer, Dragan recognizes her. Her name is Amina. She's a friend of his wife, about 15 years younger than him. Dragan has always liked her, but he doesn't care much for her husband, Jovan. Whenever they went out for supper, which they did regularly before the war, Dragan was stuck talking with Jovan, whose only apparent interest was politics, a subject Dragan has no patience for. After a while he began to make excuses to get out of these dinners, until, shortly before the fighting broke out, the invitation stopped and his wife and Amina drifted out of contact. It's obvious to Dragan that Amina has seen him and is coming to speak to him, and he looks for somewhere to hide even though it's pointless. There's no way to prevent this interaction short of running into the street, and although Dragan can barely bring himself to nod a polite hello to a stranger, let alone talk to an old friend, he isn't yet willing to risk his life to avoid a social exchange. So this is interesting because the whole thing with Dragan is that he wants to hide from his old contacts. He can barely bring himself to nod. Okay, he wants to kind of avoid. He's been distancing himself from other people as soon as his wife has left. Hoping for a miracle, he stares down at his feet, attempting to appear deep in thought. Perhaps she will walk by him. It's not impossible. It could be that she'll walk right by him without seeing him and continue into the street, arriving safely on the other side without even knowing he was there. What he wants is to cross and get his loaf of bread as quickly as he can. He doesn't want to encounter anyone. Dragan, is that you? A hand touches his shoulder, and he realizes that his attempt to look as though he was deep in thought resulted in actual thinking. He smiles, finding this funny, and Amina smiles back. "Hello, Amina," he says, leaning to kiss her on the cheek. She hugs him tight. She feels small beneath her blue wool coat. He remembers this coat. Again, another memory. His wife once told him that she liked it, and he'd always meant to ask Amina where she got it, so he could buy one for Raza, but he never did. "How are you? How is Raza? Where are you staying?" He tells her as much as he can, tells her about how his wife and son left on one of the last buses out of Sarajevo, how their apartment was one of the first shelled, and how he's staying with his sister. He can't tell her about how his wife and son left at night, and when the bus pulled away he felt somehow that he would never see them again, even though they were going only a few 100 kilometers away, not even an hour by plane. He couldn't tell her about the night his apartment was shelled, how he hid in the cellar with his neighbors and waited for the building to come down on top of them, and how he arrived the next day at his sister's, his brother-in-law answering the door and looking at him as if it was his fault his apartment was destroyed. He thinks that if he were there to tell her all the things that he can't tell anyone, they would be standing there for days. She looks at him, and he can see there's more to his story that he's telling her. She doesn't push him. Everyone has more than they declare. He isn't sure what to say next. Should he ask about Jovan? What if something's happened to him, or he's left her? At the very least, she'll be reminded that Dragan never really liked him, and that in of itself will be awkward enough. Amina isn't moving. She's standing there, waiting for him to speak. Her hair is tied back, but a few brown strands have fallen across her face. She brushes them aside, tucking them behind her ear, and puts her hand back into her coat pocket. She seems smaller than Dragan remembered, not just thinner, but shorter. He isn't sure how this is possible. If only to break this awkward silence, he speaks. "How is Jovan?" he asks, afraid of the answer. She shrugs. "He joined the army. I don't see much of him." Dragan is surprised. Jovan didn't strike him as the sort. He always pegged him as more of a talker than a fighter. Amina hesitates, perhaps seeing his surprise. Well, he's more of a liaison between the government between various branches of the army. This makes much more sense. I'm not really exactly sure what he does. All I know is that he's gone almost all the time. Dragan nods, not sure what to say. There's a sniper covering this intersection, or at least there was a few minutes ago. I'm waiting to see if he's gone. Did he get anyone? Amina looks genuinely concerned. This strikes Dragan as odd. He isn't indifferent to the deaths around him, but he can't say that he feels so much that they would register on his face. He doesn't think many other people do either anymore. So for Dragan, death has become so commonplace that he doesn't even really notice anymore that people would die in front of him. No, he says. He doesn't look to be a very good shot. She appears to think about this. He hopes she doesn't take it too seriously. He doesn't know how good a shot the sniper is. All he knows is that he missed the last time he shot. There's no way to tell how many others times he's fired without missing. I think I'll wait a bit. I'm not in any hurry, she says. She tells him she's on her way to deliver some medicine to a woman a few blocks southwest of the bakery. Radio Sarajevo has organized a medical swap, where people who have old prescriptions they aren't using can give them to those who need various drugs that are no longer available. Each day they read out who needs what over the radio and those who can help do. The woman she's going to see has a heart condition and uses the same medication as Amina's mother, who died about 5 years ago. Although the drugs are beyond their use-by date, they're still better than nothing. After all, she says, they're just blood thinners. I don't think they really expire. No, Dragan says, you're probably right. It's the same stuff as rat poison, and that doesn't expire. It is? Well, there's a little arsenic in it. Or I think there is. My mother used to joke about it. Dragan had met Amina's mother once, a year before she died. She looked a lot like Amina, but her sense of humor ran darker than her daughter's. It was apparent she didn't think much of Jovan either. When he tried to steer the discussion towards politics as he always did, she threw her hands up in the air. You and your politics. Nothing good will happen because of politics. Nothing good will happen without politics, Jovan replied, shaking his head. Which one of them, Amina said, do you suppose is the optimist in the family? Dragan and his wife laughed, but the question perplexed him, and he wasn't sure that Amina was joking. Do you know the difference between an optimist and a pessimist? Amina's mother asked, looking at Jovan, who appeared to have heard this before. A small hint of a smile cracked his lips. A pessimist says, oh dear, things can't possibly get any worse. And an optimist says, don't be so sad. Things can always get worse. When she died, Dragan didn't go to the funeral. He can't remember why now. It's possible he wasn't invited, but more likely he was and had made some excuse not to go. Do you remember Izmira Sidran? Amina asks him. He does. She was the director of a theater company. They had done a production of Hair some years ago that was a big success. Dragan had seen several of her shows since then. She was a friend of Amina's, and once he met her on the street walking with Amina. She struck him as a loud, difficult woman, and he'd been irritated by her. This year is the 25th anniversary of the first performance of Hair on Broadway, and she was invited to bring her company to New York for a performance or a celebration or something. The sun had come out from behind the cloud, and it's warming up fast. Amina unclasps the top button of her coat. Did the government approve it? Dragan is surprised. They've been very selective about who they leave the city. So this is the most important thing. All of these people are trapped within the city. The government and the people controlling the narrow tunnel out of the city do not allow all of the civilians to leave. This is a very important fact. Sure, to start with. I saw her and she told me there were 32 people on the list. 32, I said. That's so many people. But she said that it took that many to run the lights and the props and all that stuff. People you never see from the audience. So that seemed okay. But then I saw her a week or two later and the list had another 30 names on it. And she said it still wasn't complete. Dragan shakes his head. It couldn't possibly take that many people. No, but that's not the worst of it, Amina undoes another button on her coat. By the time the list was submitted, there were nearly 200 people on it. Did they let them go? No. They knew they wouldn't come back. It never used to be like this. Before the war, even when the country was a communist state, you could travel anywhere you wanted. There were only 4 countries in the world that you needed a visa to visit. Now, though, no one leaves without permission. They should have kept it just to have the first 32, Dragan says. Then they could have gotten out. Jovan says it wouldn't have mattered. He says that they would never have let them go. Maybe. But maybe some of them could have gone, just a few. Maybe they could have escaped all of this.